Well, as you may have heard by now, Jon Stewart is returning to The Daily Show. Pretty incredible. He is fantastic, and I can't wait to see him return. And in honor of that, I want to do a little bit of a flashback to one of the most legendary moments on national television in the last couple of decades. My goodness. So back in 2004, there was a show on the air, many of you might remember, called Crossfire. It was on CNN, and the hosts were Tucker Carlson and Paul Begala. And the point of the show is to have a person on the left and a person on the right discuss the news and argue about it and debate. And politicians come on and it's all heated. And then Jon Stewart comes on and unexpectedly nukes the entire thing. 3 months later, the whole show was canceled after this 2004 appearance. Now, that's a correlation, not asserting a causation there. But essentially, what happens in the clip you're about to watch is Jon Stewart calls out the whole game being played, the partisan hackery of people like Tucker Carlson, the Nerf football sort of performative stuff that went on that show and still goes on in a lot of the media. People play these disingenuous characters for ratings and views and money, and ultimately that hurts America so much. And it was a pretty epic moment, especially as it relates to Tucker Carlson, because Jon Stewart at the time called out the dangerous game that Tucker Carlson would go on to play even more severely for the rest of his career. While he was on Crossfire, he was practicing playing that character that he increasingly made further and further right and more detached from reality, eventually reaching the Tucker Carlson we know today. And before he was the modern version of Tucker, Jon Stewart saw that dishonesty of his whole act and called it out to his face. Here it is.
I think oftentimes the person that knows they can't win is allowed to speak the most freely, and because otherwise shows with titles such as Crossfire, or Hardball, or I'm going to kick your ass, or we'll jump on it. In many ways, it's funny, you know, and I made a special effort to come on the show today because I have privately amongst my friends and also in occasional newspapers and television shows mentioned this show as being bad. And I wanted to, I felt that that wasn't fair, and I should come here and tell you that I don't, it's not so much that it's bad as it's hurting America. So I wanted to come here today and say, here's just what I wanted to tell you guys.
Yeah.
Stop. Stop hurting America.
Okay, now
and come work for us, because we, as the people.
How do you pay?
The people, not well.
Better than CNN, I'm sure.
But you can sleep at night. See, the thing is, we need your help. Right now you're helping the politicians and the corporations, and we're left out there to mow our lawns.
You just said we're too rough on them when they make mistakes.
No, you're not too rough on them. You're part of their strategies. You're partisan, what do you call it, hacks.
Wait, John, let me tell you something. We're here to love you, not confront you.
No, but what I'm saying is this. I'm not. I'm here to confront you because we need help from the media, and they're hurting us. And it's now, the idea is
if the indictment is, let me get this straight. If the indictment is, and I have seen you say this, that Crossfire reduces everything, as I said in the intro, to left, right, black, white.
Yes.
Well, it's because, see, we're a debate show. It's like saying the
no, that'd be great.
To a storm
I would love to see a debate show
in a 24-hour day where we have each side on as best we can get them.
That would be great.
And have them fight it out.
To do a debate would be great, but that's like saying pro wrestling is a show about athletic competition.
I think you're a good comedian. I think your lectures are boring. Let me ask you a question on the news.
No, this is theater. I mean, it's obvious. How old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So this is.
No, I know. You're right. No, let me just go. No, come on.
And listen, I'm not suggesting that you're not a smart guy, because those are not easy to tie. But the thing is that you're doing theater when you should be doing debate, which would be great.
No, it's
not honest. What you do is not honest. What you do is partisan hackery. And I'll tell you why I know it.
You have John Kerry on your show, and you sniff his throne, and you're accusing us of partisan hackery?
Absolutely.
You've got to be kidding, man.
You're on CNN.
You say,
the show that leads into me is puppets making crank phone calls. What is wrong with you?
Well, I'm just saying, there's no reason for you, when you had this marvelous opportunity not to be the guy's butt boy, to go ahead and be his butt boy.
Yes,
God, it's embarrassing.
I was absolutely his butt boy. I was so far. You would not believe what he ate 2 weeks ago. You know, the interesting thing that I have is you have a responsibility to the public discourse, and you fail
need to get a job at a
miserably.
School, I think.
You need to go to one. The thing that I want to say is, when you have people on for just knee-jerk, reactionary talk.
Wait, I thought you were going to be funny. Come on, be funny.
No, I'm not going to be your monkey.
Go ahead.
I watch your show every day, and it kills me.
I can tell you love it.
It's so painful to watch. You know, because we need what you do. This is such a great opportunity you have here to actually get politicians
really Jon
off
Stewart?
of their marketing
anyway?
and strategy. Yeah, it's someone who watches your show and cannot take it anymore. I just can't.
What's it like to have dinner with you? It must be excruciating. Do you like lecture people like this? Or do you come over to their house and sit and lecture them and, you know, they're not doing the right thing, that they're missing their opportunities, evading their responsibilities?
If I think they are.
Look, I wouldn't want to eat with you, man. That's horrible.
I know, and you won't. But the thing I want to get to...
We did promise naked pictures of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we did.
No.
Let's get to those.
Why can't
in this book,
why
which is a
can't we
very
just
funny
talk?
book.
Please, I beg of you guys.
I think you watch too much Crossfire. We're going to take a quick break.
No. Look,
No, hold on,
please.
Joe. We've got commercials.
Please.
Next, Jon
Please
Stewart
stop.
in the rapid fire.
Please
Hopefully
stop.
he'll be here. We hope. We think.
So I'll play more from after they come back from commercial in a little bit, but I have to say something is super sad about watching those moments, because it reminds me of one of the aspects I dislike about covering the news and covering so many of these people in the media. It's the knowledge in the back of my head that drives me crazy, that especially in the modern Trump loyal media, so many figures just don't believe a single word they're saying. And as someone who got into this because I just cared about these issues and care about politics a ton and was just sort of obsessed with politics, that's super hard to contend with. So when I play clips of people on Fox News saying this thing or that thing, I'll try my best to respond to their points as presented, assuming they're genuinely expressing their views, but I know they aren't. I know this is just an act for so many of them. They're playing a character, as Jon Stewart was calling out, and that makes it a lot harder to get excited about debunking things and arguing with people, because no matter what we say or do, no matter what facts we can present, if it's still profitable, Fox will keep chugging along, Newsmax will keep chugging along, etc. It feels like we can't move the needle sometimes. And as an example of this, it reminds me of reading Tucker Carlson's text that came out during the Dominion lawsuit process, where he said he hates Trump with a passion. And we read that while all knowing that he'd go out on the air the next night and be supportive of Trump and bolster his messages. And then I'll address how liberal media fits into this analysis after watching more.
Welcome back to Crossfire. We're talking to Jon Stewart, who was just lecturing us on our moral inferiority. Jon, you're bumming us out. Tell us, what do you think of the Bill O'Reilly vibrator story?
I'm sorry? I don't.
Oh, okay.
What do you think?
Let me change the subject then.
Where's your moral outrage on this?
I don't have any.
I know.
Which candidate do you suppose would provide you better material?
I'm sorry?
Which candidate do you suppose would provide you better material if he won?
Mr. T. I think he'd be the funniest.
How would you have a stake in it that way, as not just a citizen, but as a professional comic?
Right, which I hold to be much more important than as a citizen.
Well, there you go. Well, who would provide you better material, do you suppose?
I don't really know. It's kind of not how we look at it. We look at the absurdity of the system provides us the most material, and that is best served by sort of the theater of it all, you know, which, by the way, thank you both, because it's been helpful.
But if Kerry gets elected, is it good? I mean, you said you're voting for him. You obviously support him. It's clear. Will it be harder for you to mock his administration if he becomes president?
Now, why would it be harder?
Because
the only way it would be harder is if his administration is less absurd than this one. So in that case, if it's less absurd, then yeah, I think it'd be harder. But I mean, it'd be hard to top this group. I mean, quite frankly, in terms of absurdity and their world matching up to the one that, you know, it was interesting. President Bush was saying, you know, John Kerry, his rhetoric doesn't match his record. But I've heard President Bush describe his record. His record doesn't match his record. So, you know, I don't worry about it in that respect. But let me ask you guys again a question, because we talked a little bit about, you know, you're actually doing honest debate and all that. But after the debates, where do you guys head to? right afterwards.
The men's room.
Right after that.
Right, home.
Spin Alley.
Home?
No, Spin Alley.
What are you talking about? I mean, at these debates?
Yeah, you go to Spin Alley, the place called Spin Alley. Now, don't you think that for people watching at home, that's kind of a drag? That you're literally walking to a place called Deception Lane? Like, it's Spin Alley. It's don't you see, that's the issue I'm trying to talk to you guys?
I actually believe, I had a lot of friends who worked for President Bush. I went to college with
Neither of us was ever in the spin room, actually.
No, I did. I went to Larry King's show. They actually believe what they're saying. They want to persuade you. That's what they're trying to do by spinning. But I don't doubt for a minute these people who work for President Bush, who I disagree with and everything, they believe that stuff, John. This is not a lie or deception at all.
I think they believe
in him.
I think they believe,
just like I believe in my guys.
I think they believe President Bush would do a better job, and I believe the Kerry guys believe President Kerry would do a better job. But what I believe is they're not making honest arguments. So what they're doing is, in their mind, the ends justify the means.
And that last point is one I've outlined on the show before, that I think the way that, for example, someone like Sean Hannity justifies misrepresenting the facts constantly on his show is by saying, well, I'm fighting for the correct side, to himself. You know, that's what I'm doing. So how I do that doesn't really matter. And I think he genuinely believes in a general sense going right's better than going left, but then sacrifices the truth to defend that, which, as I've said many times in the past, is a very dangerous road to go down. And then for some people, I don't think it's about fighting for the correct side at all. I think it's more purely about money, a business decision. Fox News, I think, is unfortunately a perfect example of that. Just everything being for ratings. And that's also a really dangerous path to go down. But now let's address quote unquote liberal media. I'll get to a sort of different take on that in a second. But first, I will say it's a dereliction of duty across almost all of the media that politicians aren't asked barely ever about their campaign donations. If you're blocking a particular bill and received millions through your PACs, super PACs from the industry that would be impacted, you should be confronted about that. And the reason that doesn't happen in mainstream media is because then politicians would stop showing up on those shows. So it's not evil backroom, we're going to protect the donors. It's just their viewers want to see politicians interviewed, or they think they do. And if they start asking those sorts of questions, no one will come on those shows access. But if elections are heavily impacted by the amount of money that can be raised, which they are, it's fair and necessary to press elected leaders on the ways those donations are impacting their decision making. So that criticism applies to right-wing, centrist, and liberal media alike. How often is a senator asked, do you not support lowering prescription drug costs because Big Pharma donated like a lot of money to you? And that should happen. But I'll also address something sort of different. I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts about this. I'd also be curious to hear Jon Stewart's response to this. I think liberal media in this current moment has over-adjusted to right-wing criticism. And what I mean is, for decades, right-wing media and Republican politicians have been screaming that mainstream legacy media is so liberal and so biased. Then Trump came along, fake news. And because of that, in much of mainstream media, you've seen a concerted effort to prove them wrong, to the point where the coverage of facts is suffering. The media's job, ideally, is not to fight for a team. It's not to kiss up to the powerful. It's not to make the viewers happy. It's to honestly and accurately convey reality to its viewers, the news media, that is. And so that requires challenging the powerful. It requires covering things that viewers won't like necessarily, etc. But it also requires being able to tell viewers when things aren't normal, when democracy is on the line, and when achievements are being racked up by an elected leader, Biden. And that's what I think has changed in much of legacy media. The CNNs of the world want so desperately to prove they aren't quote unquote liberal media, they're not too biased in a liberal direction, that they end up sacrificing the facts in a moment when sober coverage of the situation at hand is going to be called liberal by those who think accepting election results is liberal. Yeah, they're going to call you liberal almost no matter what. And treating this election normally and not properly covering the authoritarian threat that's posed by a second Trump term, it is a profound disservice to the viewers. And this is what would get me accused of being too liberal. But I watch a lot of media across the political spectrum in preparation for the show and have the responsibility of accurately assessing what's going on. And right now, the incentive structures have changed so much that on the right, in much of right-wing media, the way you get ratings is by praising Trump and fear-mongering out the wazoo about anything related to the left. In mainstream or left of center media, it's actually become more advantageous for a lot of outlets to avoid any praise of Joe Biden or Democrats, even when factually justified. Thus, Biden's poll numbers are what they are. And this phenomenon was really effectively explained by David Roberts on Chris Hayes' show. Take a look.
Next year will be an even more explicit referendum on the future of American democracy. And yet, there's this maddening set of rhetorical incentives driving all different factions of the American electorate and institutions and media to criticize the person representing the pro-democracy forces in that referendum, President Joe Biden. As writer David Roberts puts it, quote, there is no faction in U.S. politics, barely even elected Democrats, for whom praising Democrats is socially advantageous. It is, from almost every vantage point, uncool. Just try it on Twitter to see for yourself. And joining me now is David Roberts, author of the fantastic Volts newsletter, host of the Volts podcast, which is about clean energy and politics. David, I thought your thread the other day was fascinating about the rhetorical incentives that a whole variety of factions, ostensibly on the center left or in the establishment of American life, have towards their views of the current incumbent American president and what to say about him. Run me through your argument.
Yeah, this has been striking me for years, and it's only gotten more acute lately, I think. Obviously, anytime you watch right-wing media, Republican media, it's wall-to-wall criticism of Democrats, even more so than praise of Republicans. Demonizing Democrats has been the core of Fox's reason for being since it was born. And then you have the left, the sort of far left, the progressives, who, for good reasons, I think, want to move the Dems left and want the Dems to be more ambitious, and so are constantly criticizing Dems from the left to the point that it's become kind of a rigid habit that they do regardless, no matter what happens. And then you have these sort of, these sort of thoughtful centrist Dem pundits, all of whom need to show the other thoughtful centrist Dem pundits how independent they are, the fact they're not partisans, they're not team players, they're thinking for themselves. And the way to do that is by criticizing their own party. And so if you go down the list, you'll notice there's no one left who actually just wants to go tell voters what Democrats have accomplished, what Dems are doing, who wants to actually be partisan for Democrats. It's a weird thing that there's one of two political parties that has effectively very little spokespeople in the media. Everyone has incentive to criticize them. No one has the incentive to defend them.
So now the character, if you will, that much of the mainstream media plays, and I'm not judging their intentions, but what ends up happening is the CNNs, ABCs, etc., they play this character of a neutral observer who does semi-normal coverage of an unprecedented moment. The job of the media has never been to be neutral. It's to be accurate. And the way that mainstream media engages in this sort of behavior, I do want to be clear, it's not comparable to Fox News and their dishonesty in the overt harm that's being done, but it is doing harm, nevertheless. Even if you're going to receive unwarranted allegations of bias, it's your responsibility to properly report on the facts. And right now, impartial presidential historians can tell you, Joe Biden has had potentially the most effective presidency in at least 50 years. If that's true, then it should be reported on. And experts on authoritarianism can tell you that a second Trump term could end American democracy. He tried to block the peaceful transfer of power factually in 2020 and 2021. And he has even more devastating plans for a second Trump term, as we've gone over extensively in the past. So the media cannot fight for a team. The media also shouldn't prove they aren't fighting for a team by punching both sides equally if both sides don't deserve an equal number of punches, okay? You don't switch from covering Trump calling for the termination of the Constitution to Biden wearing sneakers to avoid tripping just to prove you're doing unflattering coverage of both sides. That's not an accurate portrayal of the political moment we're in. And that's what I think has changed a lot in recent years with the rise of the Trump Republican Party. When an authoritarian anti-democratic movement is rising, that has to be properly discussed and given as much airtime as it deserves. And the reason a lot of people don't comprehend that that's the moment we're facing is because of the situation relayed to the media that I just outlined. And that's how I think the mainstream media is currently failing, because of the changes in incentive structures. Much of the left of center audiences feel good perceiving themselves to be enlightened centrists, even when being unapologetically pro-democracy is the far more honorable and accurate position. I could go on forever, but I'll leave it there. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments, and make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel.